I feel like people are innately wired to fall into comfort, and that's fine. Some people don't want to turn that key or pull that pin, and that's their prerogative. But I think that the greater contagion is showmanship and comparison than anything else. If we can get rid of that, then the apathy and the comfortability will start to naturally evolve because there will be permission to seek fulfillment elsewhere rather than what does my social circle think of me? How many followers do I have? Am I the cool entrepreneur account? Like, who cares?
Welcome to the Passion Struck podcast. My name is John Miles, a former combat veteran and multi-industry CEO turned entrepreneur and human performance expert. Each week, we showcase an inspirational person or message that helps you unlock your hidden potential and unleash your creativity and leadership abilities. Thank you for joining us today on the show, and let's get igniting. Welcome to this week's episode of the Passion Struck podcast. Actress Gal Gadot, who's best known for playing the character Wonder Woman, said, "I think women are amazing for being able to show what they feel. I admire women who do, and I think it's a mistake when women cover their emotions to look tough. I say, let's own who we are and use it as a strength." And in this episode today, I am thrilled to be talking to a young woman, Mac Brazina, who embodies that quote through and through. I think you are going to absolutely love what she has to say as we talk about what she means by the other 23 hours, how to overcome personal trauma and ways for you to approach it, why she loves boxing, and so much more. But let me tell you a little bit more about Mac, because I think you're going to love hearing who she is and what she's about. Mac is on a mission to provide expert guidance on the road to personal empowerment. While she began her coaching career as a personal trainer, she has adapted it to now becoming a human builder, which goes so much deeper. Mac has a bachelor's degree in mass media and digital communications with a focus in interpersonal dynamics, a sponsored certification in personalized training, and an insatiable thirst for information about the brain and human consciousness. Mac believes there's a lot more to human transformation than what she calls the meat suit. And she does that by integrating science with candid human connection and mysticism, bridging the gaps between the questions that hold us back. As a compassionate guide, mentor, and coach, Mac nurtures the evolution of each individual and does it in a way that she calls one rep at a time. Now, let's get on with this episode, which I am so excited about. I am absolutely thrilled to be here with Mac Brazina. Thank you so much, Mac, for joining the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Mac, I remember the first time we met, at this point, it must be a couple years ago. I saw you at the gym, and at that time, you were a personal trainer and hadn't yet started this brand, Human Builder. But even then, the way you carried yourself, the confidence you possessed really struck out to me. And it made me want to get to know you and learn more about who you are and your personal brand. And since then, you and I have had a number of discussions. And when I thought about launching this podcast, you were absolutely one of the first guests that came to mind that I really wanted to be on the show, because I think your story represents so much about what we're trying to give our listeners and viewers with the show. So Mac, I went over earlier the purpose of our show, which is to unlock hidden potential and help our listeners unleash their creativity and leadership abilities so that they can have a passion-driven life. So I want to start this out with a pretty big question, but how did you start igniting your passion, and what were some of your initial steps?
It's been such a process. And like, with all due respect, I stopped calling myself a personal trainer a long time ago because I feel like, especially with the rise of social media and like the Fitspo generation, the fitness inspiration. Everybody wants to be a trainer, but so few people have the dedication and the heart and the capacity to step up and be a coach. And really early on in my journey, mostly because I had phenomenal mentors and coaches in my life, I was like, yes, I train, but like, I'm with you for so much more than that. For what I call the other 23 hours of the day. So it's the other 23 hours where you're not just in the gym, you're not just training, which is so surface level. Like what we do with this meat suit of ours is so three-dimensional. It's like so limited. But the human potential is limitless. And when I started really falling in love and opening up to why people were coming to me in the first place, what really lit me up, what got me excited, and really sitting down with my shadowy aspects and my fears and dementors, as I call them, from the Harry Potter books, they showed me what, first of all, I had to overcome. And then they showed me the magic that was hidden underneath it that allows me to empathize, connect with, and guide other human beings towards becoming human as fuck, which in my opinion is unlocking that potential, whether it's in the gym or in your work or in your relationships. As long as you are willing to actually turn the key. Actually, I think on the back of this shirt, we have a brain grenade, which is a symbol that I feel is really representative of what we do, because everything that I do and teach is centered around the brain and consciousness, whereas the fitness industry or personal training generally puts that last. They don't really care how you feel or what you actually want or what traumas have transpired in the body. They just want you to shred or look good for their books. And that's just something that I think is far too superficial. But in order to see the power of a grenade or the mind, you have to be willing to pull the pin. You have to make a choice to open that up. And while making that choice might seem pretty obvious, like, duh, of course you would want to pull the pin. It's not that simple, especially if you have battled with your brain in the past. It's very daunting and very scary.
So when you started getting into this, did you know this was your path, or did your clients in the end push you into it?
God, it's so interesting because like when hindsight's 2020, right? So I could look back and be like, yes, I knew exactly where I was going. The reality is, like, none of us do. None of us have any idea what the fuck we're doing. We're all just like making it up as we go. But what I was and always have been really good at is listening to my intuition. I'm a very intuitively led individual. You can chop that up to me being an Aries, or you can chop it up to intuitive alignment. But I definitely didn't know that this is where it was going to end up. When I started getting fit, I did so because I didn't have a whole lot else. And I really like self-image, confidence, assuredness in my abilities. I was talking myself out of every which thing. But at the same time, I had also started boxing with an amazing coach named Frankie Perez. He was amazing, taught me so much. But he was probably one of the first people that showed me that it was so much more than just what you looked like or what you were doing for the workout. It was how you showed up. It was how you held yourself accountable, the consistency and all of these things. But even outside of the gym or the training room, I have always been fascinated with the brain and psychology and neuroscience. And the more that my journey progressed and my willingness to sit with the discomfort of my own mental health, having struggled with anxiety and depression and panic attacks to boot, I found that there was, it was kind of like a mental holy grail where I was like, I need to know everything about you because you hold so much power over me. And every person that came to me, I was very big on sitting them down and asking why. Why are you here? Oh, well, I want to lose weight. That's awesome. We can do that. No problem. Science, calories in, calories out. It's not that hard. Why are you actually here? And I've gotten everything from rape to sexual assault to addiction to struggling with bipolar to death of loved ones to murders of loved ones to any tragedy or human affliction you could imagine has crossed my room at some point. And the more that happened and the more I embarked on my own path is in the one that aligned and felt the most resonant with me as a human being, the more I realized that people were coming to me not just for the workout. I can write a great workout, but That's not that hard. Like I can write you a swanky meal plan. It'll be geared and mathematically awesome. It's going to be great, but it's still only going to get you 10% of the way there. I wanted to take people all the way to their full potential. And every person that crossed my path would reaffirm that to me by saying, no, I'm coming to you for the mind stuff. I want to understand my brain. I want to battle. I've been struggling with anxiety. I've struggled with eating disorders. All of these other things. And really every person that's ever crossed my path is a reflection of a past version of myself. And I never, ever, ever miss a moment to acknowledge that. I always let a client know when I'm experiencing that reflection with them, because that is the beauty in being human as fuck, is when we can acknowledge that humanness and empathize, fully and completely empathize with the other individual from this grounded human perspective of saying, no, I've been where you are. I understand what you're feeling, and you can get out. Here's how.
Oh, that's really great. Well, one thing I picked up on as I was reading your background is that you are a boxer, and that initially surprised me. And one thing I think we both know about boxing is that there's only two people in the ring. In my own background, I also had to take boxing. In my case, it wasn't an elective, it was forced upon me when I was at the Naval Academy, and we were required to do it along with other martial arts skills. But what I learned from that is when you are in the ring, you had better show up, because if you fail to do so, you're going to pay the price. And I think for me, I was lucky because being in the military and at the Naval Academy, we had to show up. And I think because of that dynamic, we had an ability to level the playing field. So social, economic status really didn't come into play when you were in the ring or when you were in the military. And as you know, whether you're in the military or you're in the ring or you're now pursuing something else, there are those things that you have to do to prepare yourself to be your best, so that when you're in the ring, when you're going after this passion-filled life, you can achieve what you are set to achieve. And I wanted to ask you, what are some of the things that boxing has taught you about that and showing up?
The only reason I haven't kept boxing is because I haven't found a coach that I feel good with yet. Like, that's how much I love it. I was training like 5 days a week, 2 hours a day. Loved MMA and boxing so much. The biggest thing that I took away from that sport in particular, because I've had a myriad of sports cross my path, mostly because I like to try new things and make myself uncomfortable, is that the opponent that you're fighting is not the opponent in the ring. It's the one in the mirror. Like, there's a reason why boxers shadow box. They're boxing themselves. They're fighting themselves. And knowing who that true opponent is and what your true objective is, which is to be fully present. First of all, if you're not present, you're getting hit in the face. Keep your boundary. Know where you're strongest, know where you're weakest, and be willing to take a hit and then get back up. Whether it's a hit from a mitt or a hit from an opponent.
Now I totally get what you mean. When I was in high school, I ran in cross country and on the track team. And I would say I was a decent runner. Most people would probably say I was a little bit better than a decent runner. But what I learned from going through that experience is the first 2 years that I was running, I found that I was really just going through the motions. And I was doing it more so because of the peers around me who were on my team, my teammates, more so than my personal conviction to really do it. I was running to get better times because of them, not because of really myself pushing myself to do it. And sophomore year, we ended up winning the state championship. And that experience kind of was the impetus for me to realize that I had a goal that not only did I want to do this as a team, but I wanted to try to do it individually. And so through that act, it really started changing my discipline and my self accountability and my long term goals that I wanted to achieve. And what I found was that when I changed my mindset, that I wanted to constantly get better, constantly learn to work on my form, work on different elements that would make me a better runner, all of a sudden, everything changed. My times got better, my focus got better, my commitment got better, and my commitment to the team also got better because I knew I could play a much larger role in helping the team get success. And it wasn't until that point that I really broke out of the pack. And I ended up going on to setting course records. I finished second in the district and unfortunately had a disappointing state cross country meet my senior year. But nevertheless, that hard work ended up getting me multiple scholarships at Division I schools. But it taught me so much more. It taught me what you could do with your mind if you put all your effort into making the change and working hard and stepping into the fear zone and crossing that fear zone to the other side. And I think that's what you mean by sometimes your biggest competitor is yourself. I've actually written articles about this and I will do a future podcast on it, but it's absolutely true. You are your biggest competitor and you are the biggest hindrance that you have in starting, executing, and finishing your passion journey. So there are many different ways that you can focus on your mindset. For me, I often do it on a morning walk that I have with my dog, Bentley. And it's part of my impenetrable morning routine that I'll do a podcast on in the near future. But I use that as a time when I can clear out all the baggage and focus on what are the most important things that I have to get done today. And I usually listen to a podcast while I'm doing it so I get inspiration. But I also do things such as practice yoga. And those who are out there who don't do it because they think it's a wimpy sport, I did too. But I actually got my start in the most unexpected place. I spent a tour when I was in the military working with Special Warfare Unit 10, one of the SEAL teams, and they ended up doing yoga many times a week, one for coordination and flexibility, but also because of what it did to help them with their mindset and unlock the capabilities that they needed to unlock. So, Mac, that was a lot of words, but what I wanted to ask you in summary is, as a human builder and personal trainer, how do you work with your clients to help them with their mindset?
Absolutely everything they do. I steer clear of the word mindset because it's so generalized. And it's when we look at the brain as a muscle, there's so many ins and outs and intricacies of it. And anatomically, we can look at it and say, yeah, this is the brain. It's the same for everybody, but it's not. The wiring and the way in which these wirings transpire and happen in these dialogues that happen between the peripheral, the central nervous system, the intrinsic nervous system of the heart are all unique to every single person. And the way that the brain fires is entirely unique to every single individual. So the first step in shifting your perspective or your mindset, but really your the POV with which you're choosing to look at your life, is creating an awareness at all. Some people will go into yoga or a yoga class or do a video and their brain's still running on what they got to do. Their conscious brain is just ticking off things. They're still talking shit to themselves. They're not actually fully present. But yoga by definition is union. It's union with God. It's union with the body. It's union of the mind, heart, and gut. It's full and complete conscious presentness and unity. And that's something that I try to bring into the weight room as much as I do to the mat, with whether I'm physically training a client or working with my clients online. But the first step is creating any awareness. Be aware of when your body is tense. Where are you holding it? Where does it go? Don't try and stop it, but where does it go? Be aware of the thoughts that happen autonomically. Are you talking shit to yourself? Are you projecting judgments onto other people because you're afraid they're going to do it to you? Maybe we can just observe it. We don't have to do anything about it. We can just observe it. In that awareness and observation is where we give ourselves as human beings an opportunity to choose. And then from making that choice, we can shift our mindset. But we can't just be positive, or that's what I call toxic positivity. Because there are negative emotions that need to be felt. Otherwise, they won't be processed and they'll just hide in your body elsewhere, or they'll harbor into a behavior that you don't necessarily want.
Yeah, exactly. You totally nailed that one out of the park. And I don't think I ever mentioned this to you before, but I have recently written a book that will be coming out in the near future. And one of the chapters in the book, called the Passion Struck Framework, focuses on a thing called the Mosquito principle. And the place that I got this was I was listening to the radio and the announcer came on and asked a question to the audience: what is the most dangerous animal on the planet? And like most of the listeners, I went to killer whale, shark, great white shark, the tiny types of jellyfish, or one of the deadly snakes or insects that they have in Australia, but I wasn't even close. The most deadly animal on the planet is actually the mosquito, because through its transmission of so many diseases around the world, it actually kills millions of people each year. And it got me to thinking, there are so many things in our life that kill our passions and our dreams. They're the mosquitoes that are the people we associate with, activities we do, influences, and other habits that if we don't recognize them and conduct an audit of them, we end up ruining the very passion journey that we're working hard to achieve. And I discovered that there are three types of mosquitoes. There's the suffocating type, the bloodsucker type, and the pain in the ass type. And the suffocator type are the ones who, as you're trying to start a new venture like Human Builder, would go, if you do that, it's going to take away from your time to do this, or this is going to put so much more pressure on you to do that. They're the half glass empty types of things and activities around you. And then there are the bloodsuckers who are only out for their best interest. And they hate it when someone around them is having more success or doing something that makes them feel threatened. And so they get in your way too. And then there's the pain in the asses who we all know about, who can't help but obstruct what you're doing. And there are also the activities that go around this, such as spending too much time at your local pub, drinking every day of the week, activities that you do that don't bring you joy, or hidden influences or biases that you might have that are keeping you from making the connections or relationships that you need to have to continue on this passion journey. And so all of this is kind of on the same lines to what you were just saying. You have to conduct a mosquito audit in your life, don't you?
It's funny that you say that too, because I have a client who was, she has her bachelor's degree in kinesiology. She was a collegiate athlete. Like, she's so much fun for me to work with. Like, we have an absolute blast. We actually used to work together. And I love her to pieces. And we talk really openly when we're training about anxiety and about what's going on in our lives, or spirituality and things like that. And so one day she was like, oh, I got all these like thoughts. Like, you just got to catch them in the act. You got to zap them. She's like, they're like little mosquitoes, I've decided. And every time they come up, I just go zap. And I'm like, that's really good. Like, they just kind of fly into the bug light. And my man and I are really into a show called Big Mouth, which is so awful and it's good. And they, in this last season, talked about the anxiety mosquitoes that just buzz around you with this fear, but they're just mosquitoes. Like, you just got to swat them away. I call them ants. So they're automatic negative thoughts, right? But they're just ants. Like, are you going to let an ant take your lunch? Like, if an ant came up to you and you're having a picnic in the yard, or like in the park or something, and an ant comes up and he's like, I'm going to take your sandwich, you'd be like, get out of here. Like, flick that motherfucker away. They're so loud, whether it's a negative individual in our lives, which is really easy to spot most of the time. But what's really difficult is noticing those tendencies and those characteristics within ourselves, which I'm a big believer in holding ourselves accountable to. So are there like mosquitoes or ants living in your brain that are keeping you from doing things? Are there things in your life that you really just need to swat and get rid of? But if we chop it up to them, being loud or being buzzy and, just these nuisances in our lives, then we're not going to do anything with it. But if we can acknowledge it and see it within ourselves, then we can also see it in other people. And when we see it in other people, first, we can have more compassion for them. We can hold more space for them. We can also draw our boundary where we need to and just go, all right, I see you. I see you. We're going to put you over there. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And this leads me to one of the most important things that I continually talk about. I believe we are facing a national and global emergency. And I don't mean the COVID pandemic. We are facing the growing loss of business vitality, entrepreneurship, and people doing what makes them passionate. And I think there are a number of reasons for it, but I think the two at the forefront are apathy and comfort, the contagions of the human mind and the human spirit. And if you want to listen to more about this, you can listen to the origin episode for Passion Struck, where I go into this in more depth, or you can download the Passion Struck framework, which has even more information on it. But what ends up happening is instead of pursuing what we're meant to do, we end up doing something that I call the portfolio career. It's good, we're comfortable. We might be saying it's an okay existence, but it's not great. It's not what makes that fire in your belly light up. It's not what makes you jump out of bed or work till 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning pursuing something that could be so much more. And Mac, I wanted to ask, is this phenomenon something that you're seeing in your clients? And if so, how are you helping them to get over these factors?
There's a handful of contagions. There's apathy, 100%. There's comfort, 100%. Because every human being's right is to evolve. You are not beholden to the narrative that you were brought here with. You are not beholden to your traumas, to your past. You are a human being, and therefore you have the right to change and evolve. The comfort, though, I think people align with because the discomfort is so great and it's very in your face. Where the other contagion I would align with this topic in particular is social media, which is actually why I'm on social media, because my intention is to bring humanity back to this very vapid desert wasteland of validation and superficiality. And I find people looking more to check a box and do a thing to say that they did it rather than asking whether or not it truly aligns and resonates with them. I see it a lot in coaches and trainers, especially because of the social media bump of fitness. I see it a lot in people caught in the corporate monster, where they really want to break away. They want to do something. They really want to create something of value, but that internal dialogue of fulfillment and self-compassion is almost entirely muted, partially out of survival. Because if they were to allow that to open up while they're in the middle of this corporate monster, it would eat them alive. So I feel like people are innately wired to fall into comfort, and that's fine. Some people don't want to turn that key or pull that pin, and that's their prerogative. But I think that the greater contagion is showmanship and comparison than anything else. If we can get rid of that, then the apathy and the comfortability will start to naturally evolve, because there will be permission to seek fulfillment elsewhere, rather than what does my social circle think of me? How many followers do I have? Am I the cool entrepreneur account? Like, who cares?
Absolutely. I had this pastor many years ago, Dr. Terry Moore, and one of the most amazing messages I ever heard him preach was on the topic of keeping the main thing the main thing. And this is an episode devoted to this with my friend, Master Chief Tuck Williams, in a couple weeks that I think you listeners are going to love. But the main purpose of this message is we today are focusing so much on what is urgent versus what is important because of things like social media and other distractions around us. We take our focus off of our passion journeys and doing what we need to do. Instead of that, we end up getting distracted and we end up wasting time on things that are absolutely meaningless in the big picture. So many people are focused on what is urgent over what is important, and you absolutely can't have both, don't you think?
Actually, a really good point. I want to hop in on that really quick, because the brain does this too. Especially if we battled with anxiety to any degree, which most human beings do, especially right now. If we're constantly worried about what's important versus what's necessary, we're missing everything in between. And the brain only deems what's important based off of past survival stimuli it's received and saved. So if there is an anxious or a survival response linked to comparison, being on social media, or something of that effect, the brain says, this is immediately urgent. I must address it now. If a trigger gets pulled for somebody that has to do with a past trauma or something that has been stored in their limbic system. The amygdala is going to go haywire, and the brain is going to say, this is urgent, you must address it now, which is how we fall into those patterns of cyclical thought and negative self-talk as well.
Mac, I know you have done a ton of studying and further research on the mind and different elements of how the mind functions. Can you talk to us about how you discovered that, why, and how through that knowledge it's helping you to teach those around you about their mindset and how they can perform at a higher level?
Battling it myself. It was the biggest obstacle I ever had to overcome was my mental health. I'm talking, I dropped out of school for 2 years because I couldn't get to class because my anxiety was too high. I had lost my job, moved in with my mom, like cut myself off from my dad. I was in a toxic relationship. Like I have struggled. I could tell you the days I've woken up without feeling anxiety more than I could tell you the days that I haven't woken up with anxiety. Does that make sense? Like to me, that was just the way my brain functioned. And my dad has battled with mental illness. My mother, my siblings, anxiety, depression, eating disorders, bipolar disorder, depression. I already said depression, ADHD. So for me, it was kind of a this stops with me mentality. And in order to do that, I've kind of made myself this vessel of experimentation and research where I'm always trying to sit in the back seat of my mind and of my body and really observe how things happen, not only in the gym and in movement, but how certain thoughts come out and what they feel like and what the energetic response is and how it feels in my body, and really creating this infinitely expansive relationship between what used to terrify me between my ears and what I used to not be able to look at below the neck. And now I found this really comfortable, loving, maternal relationship with my own body and my own mind that allows me to safely and healthfully explore these things and open up the gateway of guidance for me to use this not only scientific and researched information, but personal, empathetic, real human grounded information that I've acquired through my own trial and error. And some could say that's naive, but in my opinion, it's what's made me and Human Builder as successful as it has been, is my willingness to go there with myself.
Yeah, I see that. You know, there's something I want to talk about here that I haven't talked a lot about publicly, and that is trauma that I've experienced in combat, through physical assault, and other things. And there are so many people who are listening to this podcast that have experienced their trauma in their own lives. And that trauma can be a huge stuck point, as it was for me, to achieving the things I wanted to in life. But I want to tell you, there is hope and there are ways to overcome those beliefs and turn the page. And I think it's important to tell my personal story because I went for years and years and years thinking that I was big enough that I could handle it on my own. In fact, I internalized it so much because I didn't want people to know what was really going on or what had happened to me. I didn't feel I could be that vulnerable with others. And it cost me a lot. It cost me relationships. It's cost me time that I could have been focusing on things that really matter because instead I was focusing on my inner demons. And it leads to things such as depression, anxiety, insomnia, and so much more. So if you are facing trauma in your life, we at Passion Struck understand that because many of us have been in your shoes before. And I want to tell you, there's something you can do about it, just like I did. And you know what this trauma can cause. At one point, I thought I was a laughingstock internally because what I was showing on the inside and what I was feeling on the outside were completely two different things. I know in the military, you didn't want to show that you were suffering from things like PTSD. And I found in the civilian world, it was much the same, as my peers would tease people who were suffering from depression and many other things. So because of that was a big reason that I just felt I had to suck it up, buttercup, and just move on with my life. And I can tell you that was the wrong decision. I should have tackled it head on, because now that I have worked on it, it has helped me become more vulnerable and become a better person and a better leader. So I wanted to ask you, Mac, I know you have dealt with personal trauma and it's a core of who you are, but I wanted you to explain to the listeners, what have you done and what would you encourage them to do if they are facing trauma in their life?
I appreciate you sharing that with me, and it's important for men in your position to speak about this, because you had mentioned the term macho earlier, with regard to military culture, and I work with a lot of military guys, and veterans have been a huge part of my life for a very long time, and there is something to be said for a call to action for this culture to welcome and openly embrace the discussion of mental health and mental illness as it results from combat, from conditioning, from training, from culture, that if gone unaddressed, you said you just stifled it. Well, that's going to destroy your gut. It's going to cause inflammatory conditions. It's going to keep you from sleeping. It's going to keep you from having sex. Talking about macho, like, these are the things that stand in the way of your archetype's permission to be human. And part of that humanity is allowing and experiencing and openly discussing these emotional experiences that are unsavory, but they by no means make anyone, male or female, weak. They're human.
And it reached a point for me, and I'm sure there are veterans out there who are listening who probably feel the same. But instead of embracing my friends who were veterans or who were in the military, I started fleeing from them, because when I was around them, it brought up much of the memories that instigated things like panic attacks, hypervigilance, inability to sleep, and other things. And so for the longest time, I wouldn't step foot in places like the American Legion, the VFW. I avoided veterans who I knew would want to talk about their military service, like many do, because ultimately they start wanting to ask you about what you did. And I just didn't even want to broach that topic. So over time, as I was talking about before, I kind of internalized these things and I tried to process them myself. And, I would say, I was handling it poorly already. But then in November of 2017, a couple things happened that made it even worse. I happened to walk in on an in-home robbery as it was taking place. And as I went to confront the robber, unfortunately, he was pointing a gun at me as I came around the stairs. And I had, because I was weaponless, had to flee from the scene and called the police. And then, unfortunately, a few days later, one of my best friends ended up committing suicide by jumping off the Skyway Bridge, which we have here connecting St. Petersburg and Manatee counties. And those two events ended up reigniting a situation that I wasn't handling already very well. But because of them, it also brought things to such a bad point that I knew I had to act upon it. And that's when I started going to the VA to get help and actually start facing some of my fears of earlier trauma so that I could get through this and become a better person. And sometimes my mind is in southern Iraq or Bosnia or northern Africa or back to that personal assault or back to the home robbery. But I'm learning that these hidden beliefs that we all have to be dealt with, and that these situations aren't your fault. No matter how bad they are, you can get through these beliefs. And so, Mac, I wanted to ask you, how have you found some ways that you deal with this trauma? Maybe taking a step back and looking at this through a different set of eyes. Can you describe that to our listeners? Did you know that Forbes magazine recently cited that 70% of individuals who do personal development, masterminds, and one-on-one coaching benefited from better work performance, increased communication skills, and overall better relationships? And we at Passion Struck are obsessed with self-development, coaching, and mentorship. That is why we've created a free resource to help you unlock your hidden potential. Because people doing great things in business and life are just like you, only they've had a coach along the way. And we've got that covered too. Let us show you the systems and frameworks that we teach growth-minded individuals to help them step into their sharp edges, execute on their passion journeys, and get predictable results time and time again. Go to passionstruck.com/coaching right now and let's get igniting.
I appreciate your vulnerability. I have more respect for vulnerability than I do pretty much anything else, because it's not easy. And it takes a level of emotional, physical strength to put our fears out there. And we can look at these things and say, well, how do I put them to the side? How do I shush them? How do I process them? These are the things that keep me from being me. Or we could look at these things and say, no, these were the ingredients to make you exactly who you were meant to be, which is, in this context, a voice. You know, this is a dialogue that a lot of men that, specifically men, well, men and women that resonate with your story, or anything in between. It's 2020, you know, that resonate with your story and your experiences are hearing this and saying, oh my God, I'm not crazy. Like this happens to somebody else. You know, maybe there's an opportunity for me to heal too. So we can look at these traumas and these experiences and say, why did this happen to me? Why couldn't it have been different? Why can't I get rid of this? Why is it here? Or we can look at it and say, thank you for showing me this information, whatever that information might be. Thank you for allowing me to have these first person awarenesses so that I can more effectively and compassionately guide and present leadership to those who might really need it. My personal why with everything, with coaching, with social media, with everything, is suicide prevention. So I really want to take a moment and like illuminate that there is nothing whoever's listening to this, there is nothing you are going through that will be solved through that. So please reach out to anyone, to me, to John, to anybody, if that's something that you're dealing with. But more specifically, when it comes to processing trauma, there are infinite ways to go about this. My first response is going to be asking for help, having a trusted individual, whether it is a therapist, a mentor, a friend, somebody that you can openly be vulnerable and honest with about these triggers as they're presenting themselves to you, a coach. If you don't have that, the first thing to ground yourself into is that while your brain is experiencing this post-traumatic memory in the present, that is not happening in the present. So the first step is to get you out of, whether it is a regressive thought looking back or a fearful foresight thought, which anxiety by definition is fear of the future. If we create the awareness that our brain is time traveling between past and future, we can ground it into the present. And this is going to sound really silly, but I promise that it works. And I want you to try this, like the next time that you feel your trigger is getting pulled. Count the colors in the room. The frontal lobe is responsible for all labeling, categorizing, and messaging of the brain. So it's the one that makes the decisions. It's the one that plans for potential threats. But the only way it can do that is by assessing past threats and past traumas. So when it reaches back into the limbic system and says, when was the last time this thing happened? Well, what is the most likely outcome for this? Your brain is going to rifle through all of the things that could go wrong so that it can keep you safe. But if we look at it and say, I'm here, I'm now, physically, I'm safe. The second thing you do between bringing your awareness to the present and getting your brain out of time travel is breath. The breath is one of the subconscious functions that we actually have conscious control of. So if we're able to bring awareness to the way that we breathe, the thoughts and the racing memory and the time traveling starts to slow because you're asking your brain to focus on something else. The third thing I would tell you to do is put it in writing. Writing is one of, I call it neurological digestion, but if you don't do it, if you don't process, you're going to have neurological indigestion, which results in like brain farts and absent-mindedness. Writing or chronicling these experiences for what they were and what you learned from them, which seems extreme, but whether it's journaling or lists or whatever it might be, allowing your brain to fully digest it and bring it in so that you can digest this neurological process, rather than shushing it because it's just going to come back around.
Mac, you brought up some amazing points just there. And thank you so much for your own vulnerability and for sharing so eloquently those points. And one of the things that you said is absolutely true about me. I think for many of us who've undergone trauma, having to talk about it is one of the worst things we have to do. And unfortunately, over the past 4 to 5 months at the VA, as I'm trying to get benefits and treatment for it, I've probably had to relive trauma more times in those 4 months and talk about it than I have in the previous 25 years combined. And by going through that, I started finding that for me, a great coping mechanism, and I think we all have to have one of these outlets, was starting to write. And so I have started to publish some articles about the different trauma I experienced, along with other injuries I sustained, in the hopes that writing these articles and putting them out there can help someone else. And in the case of one I wrote about traumatic brain injury, I was just hoping one person would read it and my journey for dealing with it for the past 20, 25 years. And fortunately, over 3,500 readers have gone through that article, and I've gotten more claps and comments on it than any of the other pieces I have written. And it's important for me to tell the story, especially about TBIs, because there is so much not known in the medical community about how to treat this. And because of that, many of the doctors that I have encountered are truly just guessing at what to do. And they want to look at tests like MRIs, EEGs, neuropsych exams as definitive measures to diagnosing it. And what I have learned through my own studies is that those tests are all completely flawed, and that, similar to trauma, no two people react the same to traumatic brain injury. But the system, unfortunately, and this is important for our listeners who might be going through this to understand, want to treat you as a mental health patient instead of treating the underlying issues, which in my case are polytrauma, that are going on. And it took me being such a personal advocate for myself to finally undertake tests that showed that what I had been experiencing for so many years was actually not just in my mind, but was an actual reality, that I had physical ailments. And now I'm able to get the treatment that I need for it. But I would encourage you out there not to give up and not to let the doctors tell you that it's just a mental illness, because in many cases it's not. And Mac, I remember hearing you talk about your family on another podcast and how your mom is helping veterans through a couple of different foundations that she's running. And one of them actually came to my mind because, in addition to other ailments I have horrible issues with my Achilles tendons. And I was reading that stem cells might be a way to fix this. And if I think I'm remembering correctly, one of the foundations that she leads specifically relates to using stem cells in research. And I was hoping that you could tell us more about, what your mom is doing and her foundation.
Yeah. Well, stem cell and alternative pain solutions. So my mom had a series of events transpire that left her bedridden for close to 7 years, 6 years. They actually just the other day took off the chairlift. My grandma, savage. Mom, savage. Like, they are entrepreneurial badasses. My grandma and my grandpa were both in the Air Force. My grandma was an Air Force nurse. My grandpa was an Air Force fighter pilot. And my grandfather on my dad's side was a military medic in World War II. So we have military family going back on both sides. And my grandma's superpower was plastic surgery. She had the number one plastic surgery recovery facility to the stars. And so she decided to utilize those resources and connections to provide reconstructive surgery to wounded veterans returning back so that they could get a little bit of their humanness and chutzpah back. And I was heavily involved with that growing up. And then my mom, having battled with chronic pain, she's undergone over 100 procedures, including ketamine infusions, operations, pain pumps, you name it, she's dealt with it. I have nothing but respect for her. Having gone through as much as she's gone through and still coming out on the other side going, well, how can I use this to help somebody?
Yeah,
So
that's amazing.
she's created Veterans in Pain, or VIP, where she provides pro bono stem cell and alternative medical solutions to veterans who are battling chronic pain, because these solutions aren't available to through the VA. And the VA does very little to help in an alternative way. And sometimes, most, if not all of the time, standard Western medical procedures only scratch the surface of what's actually going on. She's worked with Dr. Prager out of UCLA, who was an amazing, amazing soul to come through and help her. And he is a pain specialist, and they have an integrative pain program where they also have a psychologist on staff, and they have a myriad of other specialists working together with the awareness that pain is not just a physical experience, but it is also a psychological, emotional, and sensory experience as well.
Mac, well, thank you so much for sharing that. For me, it's a constant struggle to deal with this because I was someone who was once a Division I athlete. I had run, many long distant races, and now I am completely unable to run, and I'm forced to do things such as walk, ride a bike, or do non-jumping types of activities, which precludes me from doing things such as playing tennis, throwing the football, doing other things that I used to love to do. And, it's completely changed my life because I've gone from doing things such as taking painkillers. I've tried going to the physical therapist, going to the chiropractor, doing all kinds of exercises for it. I've gone to surgeons who told me that there isn't really a viable surgical option. And I've also tried things such as collagen to heal this. And, I believe that the stem cell research can be a huge breakthrough, and it can help many of us and the listeners out there who are suffering from physical ailments like I have.
I know very little about stem cells, so I'm not going to speak on its processes at all, because I know very, very little about it. But what I can say is that my mom, did I mention that they took down the chairlift? Like, she's doing great. So she's doing great. She fills out her whole day working with VIP. I highly recommend you check it. You definitely need to check it out if you haven't already. She's doing wonderful stuff.
Well, that is fantastic, Mac. And I wanted to talk about another thing for veterans out there who might be facing traumatic brain injury. I was lucky enough to be listening to the Jim Rohn show, and I heard a foundation come on led by a former Green Beret. It's called the Warrior Angels Foundation. And specifically for TBIs, that Green Beret was experiencing many of the same conditions I was facing. And he found a doctor who started to treat him through hormone therapy and found out that in many cases, traumatic brain injuries, and there are millions of people who have traumatic brain injuries, have long lasting impacts to our hormone levels. And if you can get that hormone balance correct, it can help you with all kinds of things: sleep, energy, attention, cognitive functions, etc. So if you're a veteran, Warriors Angel Foundation is out there. If not, there are other avenues and other practitioners who are out there who can help you with this hormone therapy. And Mac, I just now want to dive into, when I first met you, I was really blown away. I have a son who's a little bit younger than you, but you have more courage, more identification of who you are than most people do who are many years older than you. And I wanted to ask you, how did you do this? How do you have so much confidence to go out there? And if anyone hasn't looked at your Instagram account yet, I would highly encourage you to do, because some of Mac's messages are just so powerful. So I wanted to ask, with that as a backdrop, how do you teach others who are your age how to get the confidence that you have?
The running joke in my family is like, thanks, it's the trauma. Like, that's what got us here. I also tell people that on the inside, I'm like 126. There's a lot of layers to this that I'm not going to go into, but I can you clarify the question? Because there's so many ways for me to go with this that, like, I don't even know where to begin.
Well, I guess what I was really trying to ask, and I'll try to clarify it, is oftentimes you go to the gym and you see a lot of different types of stereotypes. You see the people who are constantly looking in the mirror, checking themselves out. You see the big bodybuilders who, live in the gym. And then you kind of see those people who are kind of in and out there to do their workout routine, kind of have the headphones on like I do oftenly, and are just in there to do what they need to do and get out. But when I saw you, there was just something about you and the way you were conducting it and your workout style that made me think you were approachable and different.
Me, because I have like the worst training RBF in like resting bitch face. The worst. The worst. Like when I'm in a set, I look like I could punch a kitten and I would never, like I'm the nicest person within reason. But I think to answer your question as far as like gaining confidence or feeling comfortable in your own skin enough to like share your message and be vulnerable, I just hang out with you. You're pretty dope.
So
If you
hang
don't
out
want
with
to hang out with
yourself.
you, who will? I would definitely say spend some time with yourself. And the other thing I would say is get to know little you, because he, she, they is very much so alive and well. And getting to know that little unfucked with, untampered with version of you has all of the answers.
Yeah, I heard you right. And I wanted to bring up one of my favorite podcasts, the Tom Bilyeu show called Impact Theory. And he had a guest on recently, and they were talking about self identity. And one of the things that this guest said, and I think there's a lot of truth to it, is that one of the first steps that you can take in trying to understand what your purpose or passion is to go back to when you were a kid. And back then, what was it that brought you joy? What were those activities that created happiness, excitement, passion in your life? Because oftentimes, as life goes on, we go in such a different direction. But he said, and I think he's right, that if you really look back to that time and look back to what you really enjoyed doing, that can be a very good starting point.
I don't think enough people do that. In the spiritual healing community, they'll talk about healing the inner child. Like, yeah, okay, it's little you. It's you before the world got to you. And he's still there. They are still there. They're still super aware. They're most of our trauma triggers, to kind of bring this conversation full circle, are the wounded, unheard, underappreciated younger version of us that did not feel that they got what they needed or didn't feel like they mattered at all. And so if we start to listen to them, if we start to bring that awareness and that dialogue with our past or younger version of ourselves to the forefront of our awareness, then we can say, okay, I understand you didn't feel heard then. How can I make you feel heard now? I understand you didn't have this information then, but look at everything that we've learned and what you have available to you now.
Yeah, absolutely. And that leads me into this next topic. I talk to so many people I am helping, and probably many listeners of this show today, who, when I start asking them why they can't undertake the passion journey and live the life that they want, I always get money and time. And I'm going to tackle the time side because I truly believe that time is malleable. And I brought up my experience of running cross country earlier in this podcast, and I want to use that as an example of this time malleable concept. When I was purely running because I was trying to impress my teammates, oftentimes I would get into workouts and they would feel like they lasted forever. But when I changed my perception and my focus and my dedication to truly wanting to be the best I could be and the best runner I could be, things suddenly changed. And I found out that I could bend time. Suddenly, I would do mile repeats on the track, something that I absolutely hated. And before I knew it, an hour on the track felt like 5 minutes. And yet, there were other times when I'd be doing an activity for just 4 or 5 minutes, really trying to concentrate on something, that it felt like I had been doing it for an hour. And I think the same thing can apply for you. If you are truly passionate about what you're doing, you can change time and focus on the things that you want to focus on in your life that are going to take you closer to your goals. And I can help you do that as a guide and teach you as well. So, Mac, using that kind of as a backdrop and how we all have time in our lives, I wanted to use this as a great intro into your concept, which I love, the other 23 hours. Can you explain that to our listeners?
In my opinion, you can't afford not to. The other thing that I'd like to piggyback off of that is that the brain doesn't know how to tell time. Time is something that we have constructed to give ourselves some sense of time and space based on the solar rhythm. And then our body functions off of that circadian rhythm based off of the amount of sunlight we do or don't get. Which, because of how much tech we have in our experience, the blue light emitted from this tech stimulates that circadian rhythm to make it think it's daytime. If you've ever been to Vegas, they do the same thing. If you're walking through the Venetian at 3 a.m. and the sky's blue, you're like, I'm not tired. Like, no shit. Like, your body thinks it's daytime. The same goes for memory, right? So if we're talking about traumas, if we're talking about old belief systems, if we're talking about healing little you, hanging out with little you, we're talking about memories that exist in the brain that have not been processed yet. Not only that, but the brain does not know whether it's happening right now or if it's already passed. To the nervous system, especially in a post-traumatic sense, it's happening right freaking now in your nervous system. It's like, nope, here it is. This is what's happening. So if we can ground that and appreciate that and say, I understand, brain, that you think that this is happening right now. I understand that this is the way things were, but that doesn't mean that it's the way things are. And when we take that present perspective, we can consciously and with intention redirect that into something that's far more serving to our overall well-being. The only way to do that is to get comfortable with the other 23 hours of the day, which is where you do the reps that matter. You can flex all you want in the gym. You can be the biggest, baddest motherfucker in the gym and still be small on the inside.
What an amazing point, and also something that you literally hear all the time. Mac, I can't end this podcast without allowing you to talk about female influence. And I want you to talk about female influence because I think it's something that's core to you and that our listeners can learn so much more about themselves through. I wanted to ask, how do you think women's strength and this whole concept of masculinity around females is changing? Because women today are far different than how society looked at women as I was growing up. And how do you think this change is impacting women and what they're doing?
They're not, they're just open about it. If I were to argue, like, I love men, I work with mostly men. Women have the superpower of maternal instinct, which allows us to not only have compassion for ourselves. You ever seen a group of female women? They are so physically affectionate with one another. Girl, you look amazing. I mean, ideally, if you're hanging out with the right women, with empowered women, they are going to empower you. If you're hanging out with weak women, they're going to tear you down. They're going to be a mosquito. They're going to suck all the goodness out of your life. But when it comes to influence, takes such an interesting connotation too, with the influencer archetype, which I don't even know what that means. But when it comes to female influences in my own life that I believe and hold to that female empowerment standard, the first person that comes to my mind is my grandmother, and my great grandmother and my mom. My great grandmother supported her entire family through the Depression by starting a knitting company. My grandmother was an Air Force nurse who started the #1 plastic surgery recovery facility to celebrities in Beverly Hills. She had a whole wing of a hotel that was just hers, to run her business and do her thing. And then she started her foundation, and she's a real estate, like, she has a real estate license and works in, investing in real estate and all of that. So she's a badass. My mom had divorced my dad at 28 with a kid on each hip. My brother was about 6 months old. And a couple years later wound up remarrying, but built her entire photography business from the ground up because it was something that she was passionate about, that she always wanted to do. She had finished her degree even after taking time off, having been through a very complex marriage, and procreating, which will do a number on a woman. And she started an incredibly successful photography business that wound up being international. She was being flown around the globe to do weddings for very high level people. So when I think of female empowerment, I my instinct is to combat business being the center of it, but I feel like it's the self-sufficiency and the willingness to be a tried and true self-starter from start to finish that makes an empowered woman an empowered woman, where she is not going to be reliant on the approval, the acceptance of uh, a man in her life, which is the conventional breadwinner, the conventional nuclear breadwinner, which there's a lot of issues with the nuclear archetype that we'll talk about that later. But a woman that's willing to say, you know what, I know I've been through things and I still have love to give. I know that I'm strong physically and I'm feminine and sexy and letting myself own it. I know that I can fuck you up if I need to, but I will love you enough to hear you out first. To me, an empowered woman is a balanced woman who is, it's not about masculine or feminine because they exist in all of us, whether we have a dick or not. It's the balance of those two energies and the equal give and take that flows through an individual's experience that makes an empowered woman an empowered woman.
No, that is great. And my partner currently, who I absolutely love, happens to be a nurse practitioner. And she is one of the most empathetic people that I know. But more so than that, she's one of the most authentic people you will ever meet. And what I really love about the way she interacts with people is you always know where she stands. She always gives it to you in black and white. And if something is on her mind, she doesn't wait to raise it to you. She just puts it out there. She does it in a kind way, but she puts it out there because she would rather be authentic and vulnerable with her feelings than to hide it.
Can I just tell you, that's a gift, because that woman, if she is that way, has been through some shit and she has dealt with likely the polar opposite of what you're offering her, and is like, listen, I care about you so much. I'm going to be blunt with you. I feel for you and have so much love for you. I'm going to be straight with you, because she doesn't want to mislead you or be misled. Like that's power. That's a gift. That's true love, in my opinion.
And I think it's amazing, truly amazing, that in any given day, she is seeing 20 to 30 patients, and she really wants to treat each one of them as she would want to be treated if she's going to see the doctor. And so she does it with a ton of empathy. And so it's amazing to me that she's able to get off of work, because if that was me, my mind would probably be a million miles away. I'd probably be very frustrated. But she's able to, come and be with me and be present and kind of, we talk about the day, but then she's there giving me words of encouragement and helping me sort through, my own issues and personal demons I'm facing, and really is a great sounding board for me, to execute and stay on my own personal journey.
I do work with mostly men, and there's something to be said for a balanced masculine. A true empowered man, they are not macho. They're not down woman, go make me a sandwich. That is not a true, that to me, that's a weak man. Any man that hides behind either his muscles or his money is weak as hell. But a man that says, hey, I'm feeling things and I need to process them, and I love you enough to let you know what's going on. Do you mind if I just talk this out with you? Power. A man that is willing to empathetically connect with himself and others, divine.
I can't remember his name. I think it's David Coggins. I know his last name is Coggins, but he's a former Navy SEAL. And I happened to hear him talking the other day, and he was talking about how so many material things in his life were tearing him down, and how he was touring around now just with the backpack on his back, and how the simplicity of that was completely changing his life, his interactions with others, and the complexity of what he was having to deal with. And I just wanted to go on that point for a couple seconds, because there are probably many of you out there who might have been like I was. I had reached a point in my career where I was CIO of a Fortune 50 company. I was at what should have been the height of my career. I was making more money than I knew what to do with, had more cars than I could possibly drive, but I had lost my focus on what was most important. And along the way, my passion to truly serve others. And what happened was on the outside, I looked like I was leading this amazing life, making all this money, doing all these things, but inside, I was truly miserable. I was facing the demons I talked about of trauma. Plus, I was now in a job that I really didn't care for. I was forced to be doing 70 to 75% of my job dealing with politics and the other 20% dealing with people issues. And I couldn't use that human expertise, the visionary skills, and other things that I love to do nearly as much as I wanted to do them. And so it started to cause me having a downward spiral, so to speak. And I think oftentimes we are looking for the wrong things. We look at, oh, this person has this $1 million boat, or they have all these cars, or they have this, or they have that. When what truly matters is what is it that makes you happy? What is it that gets you out of bed, energized, regardless of how much money you make, and want to live that life that you are meant to live? I believe we're so much living in a flawed reality that is again brought on by the contagions of the mind and the contagions of the human spirit. And I wanted to ask you your thoughts on this.
Completely flawed reality, further perpetuated by social media and the media. It's exhausting. And I love when I get a male client that has leaned in one of those directions. And then like within weeks, they're like, Mac, like, hi, Mama Mac. Like they're so excited about experiencing this balance and this self-compassion and this openness within themselves. And then they have no choice but to go share it. And, we can look at fulfillment as a full bank account or a full house or a full garage, but fulfillment is something that fills you up, not somebody else or something else, And I think that if I were to say anything to like the archetypal masculine in 2020, it would be give it a rest. Like what are you flexing for and why?
One of the things I am most proud of is the person who my son has become. And I will tell you, he is such a genuine, nice, and authentic human being. And it means the world to me that he is the person he has become. And I hope that his mom and I had something to do with that. But I just love the way that he treats people and the way that he is trying to pursue his life. It's so interesting to watch. And you're right. He came over a few days ago and, I was having dinner with them. I was cooking. And the whole time he's unpacking his computer and working on it. And, I'm trying to have a conversation and he's distracted. And it was just so funny because 10, 15 years ago, he would tell me the same thing when I came home from work. And, it's something that I brought to his attention and, kind of said, it's so funny because, ironically, you're now doing what you used to call me out on. And, I'm going to leave it there. But one thing I wanted to do was give you an opportunity, Mac, that if people want to find you, give you a shout out, where can they go to learn more about Mac Brazina?
First and foremost, if you want to connect with me like a human, follow me at the human builder, the_human_builder. If you are curious about guidance or coaching, there is a link in that bio that you can check out, or you can just head over to humanbuilder.com. We're on YouTube as The Human Builder, TikTok as The Human Builder, and you can follow me on Twitter at Mac Brazina, where you can hang out with my brain thoughts. But mostly, if you are interested in guidance, if you're curious about what's next, shoot me a DM on Instagram. It's just me. So it's the fastest and easiest way to get a hold of me. And we'll figure out what's next for you. But just connect with me. Don't be worried. If you listen to this and it resonates with you, just send me a message. I promise you will get a response.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for showing that information. And I know you're a huge film buff and love to read. So I did want to ask you, is there anything that you're watching or reading right now that you would turn the audience onto?
What I'm reading right now may not resonate with most people. I'm on my second read of the Bhagavad Gita, which is the Hindu gospel. And that's my favorite. That's my morning time. I'm also reading Circe, which was a recommendation from a friend, which is more of a fantastical novel. It's a fantasy novel, but and I was doing a reread of the Harry Potter books through quarantine. So
Well, Mac, thank you so much for coming on the show. That was a ton of fun. And I just wanted to thank you again for being here today and sharing all that you shared in the authentic way that you only can do it. Thank you so much. What an episode that was with human builder Mac Brazina. That interview was everything and more than I hoped it would be. And she provides so much guidance through her passion-struck obsession with helping people grow and become who they need to become. I hope you absolutely loved that episode and got as much out of it as I did. And please listen to me and our podcast on Tuesdays and Fridays when you can learn more about how to overcome your fears, unlock your hidden potential, and unleash your creativity and leadership abilities. Thank you so much for joining us. The purpose of our show is to make passion go viral. And we do that by sharing with you the knowledge and skills that you need to unlock your hidden potential. If you want to hear more, please subscribe to the Passion Struck podcast on Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your podcasts at. And if you absolutely love this episode, we'd appreciate a 5-star rating on iTunes and you sharing it with 3 of your most growth-minded friends so they can post it as well to their social accounts and help us grow our Passion Struck community. If you'd like to learn more about the show and our mission, you can go to passionstruck.com where you can sign up for our newsletter, look at our tools, and also download the show notes for today's episode. Additionally, you can listen to us every Tuesday and Friday for even more inspiring content. And remember, make a choice, work hard, and step into your sharp edges. Thank you again for joining us.